Hello, and welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened, where we discuss, explore, and connect with fellow empaths, healers, intuitives, and seekers. Hello, empaths. Today we have a fantastic show for you and a great guest to introduce you to. We're going to be talking about spiritual intelligence with our guest, Yosi Amram. But before we jump in, let us tell you a little bit about his background. Yosi began his leadership journey in the Israeli military, where he received numerous awards and garnered the fastest promotion record in his regiment's history. Despite these accomplishments, the military chafed at his soul, eventually inspiring his lifelong quest for more humane approaches to leadership. After leaving the military, he studied engineering at MIT and earned an MBA from Harvard. He then founded and was CEO of two tech startups, both of which he led through successful IPOs. But after a dark night of the soul, he went back to school for a PhD in clinical psychology, ultimately developing the first research-grounded theory and validated measure of spiritual intelligence. Working now as a therapist and leadership coach, he's passionate about teaching people about spiritual intelligence, and he's the author of Spiritually Intelligent Leadership. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Samantha, for the kind words. Wow. Okay.
Yes, we are excited. Let's start off because, as empaths, we always hear that we have a high EQ, that we're very well versed in emotional intelligence. How is that different from spiritual intelligence?
Okay, that's a great question. So there are parallels between emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence, as you're touching on. Let's first, define emotional intelligence. Essentially, emotional intelligence is the ability to draw on emotional resources and information to help manage emotions, our own and others. So, but the focus is what you would call emotional information and resources. So, by analogy, spiritual intelligence is the ability to draw on spiritual resources and qualities and embody them in daily life to enhance functioning and well-being. So you might say, well, what are those spiritual qualities and resources? So these are the qualities that have been hailed and celebrated by all the world's spiritual traditions for thousands of years. Things like purpose, service, gratitude, trust, integrity, intuition, humility, presence, and so on. So these, in my research, I interviewed to come up with this theory and model of spiritual intelligence. Interviewed 71 teachers across all the world's traditions, including Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, shamanism, Taoism. And I made sure I had at least four leaders and teachers in that tradition that were nominated by their peers for walking the talk. And then what was exciting was that regardless of their cosmology and theology, whether they believed, Muhammad was the final prophet, or Jesus was the Messiah, or Moses is the one who wrote the Torah and received it from God on Mount Sinai, or Father Sky and Mother Earth, which would be the shamanic perspective, or whatever it is, the theology and cosmology and the language, what they all universally agreed on as these qualities, you might call them virtues. And these have been, celebrated by these traditions for thousands of years, well before modern science. Now, what's exciting these days is that modern science and psychology developed this field of called positive psychology. Probably have heard of that. And, that was kind of started by Marty Seligman, and he developed a measure called character strength inventory, or values in action. And if you look at the 22 qualities that came through my research of spiritual intelligence, over half of them map directly to qualities in positive psychology, like hope and trust and joy and transcendence and so on. Um, so so in my research, emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence show small correlation. And if you look at the concepts, they both make sense because emotional intelligence involves self-awareness of your emotions and self-regulation of emotion. Now, in spiritual intelligence, we talk about something slightly deeper that covers emotions, but self-knowledge. The main dictum of the spiritual path is starting from Socrates and even before that in India and, whatever, was know thyself, know thyself. So that means you know your emotions, which is one level of the surface of the ocean. But when you know thyself, you know yourself at the depth and the depth of the ocean. And so with emotional intelligence, you can do self-regulation. You're angry and you're aware of that, so you don't act it out, right? You don't throw shoes at someone, you don't curse them, you're not whatever. So that's emotional regulation. With spiritual intelligence, you have deeper inner peace and equanimity. So you're sort of rooted at that depth of the ocean, and at the surface, there might be waves. So in both cases, you're not acting it out. But with spiritual intelligence, you have something deeper of that inner peace and equanimity. Um, but there is some small correlation, but in my research, they are distinct, and each of them makes a contribution to our well-being, and in my research around leadership. And I can get more nerdy. I want to pause.
No, that's a fantastic distinction.
No, I absolutely love this. I love comparative religions, and I'll often say if you go back to the original tenets of all the religions, they're saying the same thing. Be kind, look out for each other, do the right. I mean, we know this, so that you have research to support that is absolutely lovely. And I know that with emotional intelligence, there's often been people have considered some people have more of an innate ability or more of just a generalized way of relating to that. Do you find the same thing with the spiritual intelligence, or do you feel it could be a learned behavior?
Well, yes. I'm just being a little cheeky here. Yes.
Next question.
Yeah, yes. Well, there is a biological component. But the person who developed this whole theory of multiple intelligence is Howard Gardner in Harvard.
Mhm.
And one of his things is he defined intelligence as a set of capacities that have positive outcomes within a cultural context and values. But part of it is that there is a biological correlate to it. And so if it's just, I'm a good Chinese cook, it's like, okay, you wouldn't call that an intelligence, just I have a capacity. But what makes something intelligence is that it's something deeper, more universal, and has a biological correspondence. But they have discovered that, there is something even called the God gene, that certain people have more of a disposition to develop into a transcendent dimension. And, there's been a lot of studies around the brains of meditators. And so as you meditate a lot, your brain pathways change. There's a deeper connection in your corpus callosum between your left brain and your right brain, and so on. So some people are born with certain structures, and I don't know exactly all of it, that have more of a proclivity for developing these capacities. And we have this thing called temperament that might affect our emotional intelligence and proclivity. I mean, some babies are born, less regulated and more colicky, and some people are more sensitive. And you guys are focused on empaths, and I think some people have a lot more sensitivity, and which is double-edged sword in a way. I mean, it's a blessing that we have that sensitivity, but then it's hard to maintain our boundaries, and because we're so empathic, we can lose ourselves and get overly affected, and we have difficulty. So that's actually where, if you're an empath, there's some things in him, I imagine. I mean, I don't know. You guys educate me. Why am I telling you about this?
Well, I think a hard thing about being an empath is we feel like we have to be there for everyone. And when I listen to you talk about spiritual intelligence, it does sound a little bit more self-focused so that you can really get to the heart of who you are. What are some strategies or tips that have worked for you and your many clients that have helped people remove layers of societal or family expectations and labels that are holding them back?
Yeah, wow, that's an important, huge issue, and I also don't just want to comment on, yeah. So when you're empathic, you're focused on helping other people, and that's beautiful, and there's a lot of compassion and empathy. I would not necessarily say that if you're spiritually developed or intelligent, that you're self-focused. So this is the paradox. I mean, what I talk about with spiritual intelligence is interconnection, interconnection, and ultra connection. That means, connecting to oneself at our depth. And then, but when we do that, we find that we share in the same essence and sacred spark of life with other people, and that connects us to other. And then from there, we also connect to the transcendent dimension. Uh, but when you think about it in a relationship, let's just say a romantic relationship or any relationship, there's a dance between the we-ness and we have an urge to merge or to find unity, but we also want to find our autonomy. And so if you talk about, let's say, attachment theory with infants, when we have healthy attachment, we we know how to be intimate, but we also know how to be autonomous. So I think the trick is how to be empathic and compassionate, but not lose my ground, my anchor in myself. So, like as a therapist or someone who works with people in trauma, if I am so impacted by someone's trauma that I lose my center, then I'm no good for them. If they're drowning, if I'm jumping into the pool and drowning with them, I can't get them out of the pool. So I think to create it to position as well, I'm either empathic or I'm self grounded. So I say again, yes, both. I need to do the both. And but in reality, part of the way we're empathic is because we're noticing what's happening in us. We have our mirror neurons, we have, the energetic, even physical electromagnetic field. When you put two people in a room within 6, 10 feet, your heart's electromagnetic field affects mine. So that's how I know actually I have to be attuned to myself to know what is happening with you. But I need to stay grounded and centered, otherwise I can't really help you.
Mm, so true.
Very,
Am I making sense?
yes, you explained that beautifully. You really did. And I love that you weave the science in with the conversation, in with the message. It's incredible. You've written a lot about trust. You've done a lot of work with trust, and I know that that's connected with trauma bonding, all the things that we've learned over the years. I guess my question is, how about, because many sensitive people, many empaths have a difficult time with trust because they've been hurt, they've been burned, they struggle to learn to trust themselves in situations because they may have misread a situation. How can someone learn to foster and learn that trust if it hasn't been a part of their existence so far?
Wow.
I
That's
know that's
good. And
light and fluffy for the
great.
podcast,
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. No, no. I mean, it's a great question, and I think it's a question. So, for me, I don't think any of us are completely done with the trust equation. And so it's an ongoing process. I will just say this, I come from Israel, and my native language was Hebrew. What is interesting is in the Hebrew language, the word for trust, or sometimes translated as faith, is called emunah. And emunah shares root in Hebrew with imun, which is practice, which shares root with oman, which is artist. So what this is trying to say, and what I'm trying to say, is that trust is a practice and an art form, and so So I'll just say that. And then also that there are many levels of trust. Like, do I trust myself? Do I trust life? Do I trust other people? Do I trust the universe? And life more broadly. And some of us have easier time with one dimension of trust than others. There are people that are very self-reliant, so to speak, and they just trust themselves and no one else. I mean, that's in a way lack of trust because it's lack of trust of other people and it limits them. So anyway,
I
what
love how in one of your articles you wrote down that the opposite of trusting in the unexpected is trying to control the
yeah,
uncontrollable.
yeah. Yeah, so when we don't have trust, then we have to control. So just going back to the person who doesn't trust other people, in order to manage their fear or anxiety, we have to control other people. And I see that all the time in leadership positions or in work environment, people that have low trust of others, become micromanagers and don't delegate and don't empower and they try and control. And that doesn't bring out the best in people. So, but, a lot of it, so as you said, has to do with our early upbringing. From the moment we're come into this life, are we welcomed, are we received, and our world is our primary caretakers, primarily the mothering person figure. And if they are there for us and they can nurse us and hold us and then Eric Erickson, who's this developmental psychologist, talked about the first stage is shame versus trust. And then later these theories have been developed with attachment theory, and then people develop secure attachment if someone is attuned and is there for them, and then but over time they learn to differentiate, but they always have a safe home base where you'll see a 2-year-old, they'll wander away from the parent, the mothering figure, but they'll periodically look back to see that home base is still there. And so then they develop trust in this secure attachment, and then that plays in their relationship. So now, when you don't have it, what can you do? When you didn't have secure attachment with your parents, where whatever you were born into a war zone, and there are a lot of trauma from day one. And for example, I was in my mom's pregnancy period when Israel was going through a war, and my dad was absent in my birth. And so, I only realized recently how that pre-verbal, pre-birth, and even transgenerational trauma with my family being refugees and the things they've suffered, all of that affected my nervous system. And I wasn't even aware of that till some of the recent world events. So I've had to consciously work on that on myself. So how can one do that? I mean, the first thing is if we didn't have a secure attachment with a parent, then we can try and develop that with a therapist or a trauma expert, and or a human partner, a friend. And so there is this thing called earned secure attachment. And so, but then he said, well, some people don't have a partner, they can't afford a therapist. What can they do? So there is actually now research on meditation practices where you can visualize and we could trick our brain, so to speak, that doesn't know when you're imagining something or you're doing a visualization, whether or not it's happening in real time or whatever. As far as the brain circuitry, it's the same. So if you just go through a meditation practice where you imagine having an attuned parent, that starts to rewire your brain. And there's research about that. So there are these attachment meditation. We develop trust through because we ask ourselves the question, okay, I've had a lot of difficulty in life, whatever it is. But in this moment, am I okay? Am I safe? And then you look around, there's this thing called the orienting response, right? To see that this is our orienting response that got us safe in the jungle or whatever we were come from, and we look around, is there danger? And we say, well, right now, in this moment, here now, I am safe. And then we say to ourselves, somehow I've lived through whatever traumas I have had and whatever challenges. And whether it was a car accident or fire. I mean, there are people right now in California. I got some clients who were from there and they've had traumas, their homes burned, their neighbors' homes burned, whatever. They're really traumatized. But, so it's in their nervous system, but our then you pause and you look around and you say, I'm okay now. And I survived those situations. And so we keep reminding ourselves. And then as we remind ourselves that we're okay in this moment and we have survived the past, then whatever next challenge we have in this moment, we lost a job, we got laid off, we're going through a divorce, we got a medical diagnosis. I mean, all the things that tend to make us feel unsafe, we can say, well, I've had situations like that and I have survived them. But this is where spiritual intelligence comes in, is that basic trust that, Einstein said one of the fundamental questions is, do we believe we live in a friendly universe or not? And if we have that orientation, then that's a resource. Yeah.
I love this because your book, Spiritually Intelligent Leadership, and I really thought this is so desperately needed on a global level right now. I'm not making it political. I'm not making it specific to any part of the world or country or demographic. But I love that you put how to inspire by being inspired. And everything that you're talking about feels like it's reconnecting with that inspiration within and fostering that through trust and growth and having a purpose, because it's great to recognize it, but you have to do something with it. And could you talk a bit about your book, please?
Sure. Well, so I mean, you're kind of hit on the key point, is how to inspire by being inspired. So, first, leadership is first and foremost an inside job, and you can't lead anybody else until and when you can lead yourself. I mean, that seems kind of, to me, pretty obvious. And you can't inspire anyone until you are inspired yourself. And So and then what is to inspire? I mean, I remember in one of the first cases at my Harvard Business School program was managers and leaders. Are they the same or different? And so what is the difference between managers and leaders in the workplace? A manager is someone who makes decisions, allocates resources, etc. And that's an important function. But the first thing they said, what do leaders do? They inspire, they energize, they motivate, they breathe aliveness and a purpose and a vision and into the organization. And what is the root word of inspire? It comes from spirit. And what is spirit? The animating breath of life, right? So we have to connect with our life force and connect with our, he said purpose. How do we get to that? We connect to our unique gifts. Like life gave us a gift, first and foremost, life, but each and every one of us have our own gifts, talents, superpowers, whether it's being empathic and sensitive, or whether being very mathematically oriented and I can be a great programmer, or having a great sense of humor and I could be a comedian, or having, a great musical talent and I can be a musician. I mean, each of us are born with our own set of talents, and naturally life kind of gave it to us because it wants us to actualize it and share it to contribute to the web of life that we are embedded in. So when we have those talents and those gifts, it's like we want to exercise them, and that's the most rewarding and fulfilling thing. And then when we use it to contribute to other, that is further. So it's self-actualization and it's meaning and its purpose, and it's the reward of knowing that I'm helping others, which all the research shows is much more fulfilling. If you give people $20 randomly, and and of course, when you get your $20 in a lottery kind of thing, you're happy for a moment. But then if you take people and you divide them and you say to some of them, okay, go use the $20, buy yourself a gift. Great. And then the other people, they say, oh, take your $20 winning and go use it to help somebody else. Well, buy somebody lunch, buy them a gift. At the end of the day, the people that won the $20 and spent it on themselves, they had a momentary happiness, but they have no lasting impact. The people who were told, take that $20 and use it to help other people, had a higher level of fulfillment from their day compared to the people who spend it on themselves. So that tells you that when we use our gift, like you got the gift, you got the $20, go use it to help somebody. That's more fulfilling than just quote unquote selfishly for us. So as leaders, we got to find our purpose and we want to use it to contribute and share. And sometimes our gifts come from our traumas and our suffering. The person who suffered, domestic violence goes off and starts a center for helping people who are fleeing domestic violence situations, whatever. I've had my own difficulties and you might say traumas in being a CEO, and part of my gift now is to help other leaders because I've lived through those things. So, um, I
Yeah,
don't.
that's so important because you have to separate out the expectations of being a leader, which we hear just on the news is all about the bottom line and making money and bringing in profit. And then you add spirituality to that. It's not super accepted in our culture, and I'm glad you're on the forefront of that. One of my friends just started a job, and the CEO is so wonderful. Every year at the beginning of the year, he sends out a letter explaining how he used to be a workaholic and he worked all the time and rarely saw his family. And then his wife was diagnosed with cancer, and he took time off to nurture her and help her through that. And she's luckily fine and is doing great. But he said it changed his whole life. So he insists that everybody will work remotely, either Friday or Monday, so they can have more time with their family. And I thought, wow, like when I was coming into the workforce, you would not have heard that from any boss. And today, that does seem to be more common. And so I think that's a great trend that I think your work is helping to inspire.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just elaborate on what you're saying. There is that research that I mean, historically, I remember when I went to Harvard for MBA. I mean, the prevailing theory was that corporations exist to make money and maximize shareholder return. That those are the ones who own us. But since then, all the research shows that companies that take a multi-stakeholder approach, meaning they cater to their shareholders. Yeah, we got to produce profits and stock price, but part of our audience is our employees, and we got to make sure they're fulfilled. And part of our audience is our customers. We got to deliver value and quality products for them. And part of our audience is the community that we're embedded in. And the companies that think of the benefits they accrue to all their stakeholders actually end up producing higher shareholder returns than the companies that say, oh, we only exist to maximize shareholder return. So it's kind of paradoxical, but it shows you when you have a win-win mindset, everybody benefits instead of it's shareholder versus employees, and we're going to work them as hard as we can and pay them as little as we can because we're trying to maximize profit. Well, then they're not as creative. You have higher turnover. You have burnout. They don't produce and maybe that worked when everybody was doing mechanical jobs on an assembly line, but those jobs more and more are automated by robots, and more of what we need human beings is to be knowledge workers, to be creative. And you can't take someone and make them work 16 hours a day and they're not going to be creative. If they take breaks, all the research is people that take breaks are end up producing more. If someone works 6 hours in a row versus someone who works 45, 50 minutes, takes a 10-minute breaks and still 6 hour elapsed, the person who took breaks produces more output and better quality, fewer errors than someone who just tried to cram the full 6 hours. So, so the point, and that's especially true with people that are higher skilled people, and especially now that you're going to get AI. And so what with AI, more and more of the things are going to get automated, and our thing is going to be the unique creativity and the human connection and the sense of community. And so one other thought about the CEO story that you have is it was a beautiful example of, trust in a way and difficulty into opportunity. When you have trust, then, his wife got this cancer diagnosis and that was terrible news, but it turned around his life and her life, and now he's having all this great positive impact. So there was a silver lining in that terrible thing that happened. Not that that was a good, but most people, when you ask them, to look back at some of the terrible moments in their lives, they find that something good came out of it. Like
Yeah,
My
I
Dark
agree.
Night of the Soul, you mentioned. And it was, and then you didn't mention that led me actually into from there into a spiritual awakening, which threw me into a manic episode. And because I didn't know how to, it blew the circuits of my mind. And I was a CEO of a public company in the midst of a manic episode. And I had all these great ideas, but I didn't know how to manage my team and my board. So they put me on a leave of absence. They pushed me. Our stock price got cut in half. It was terrible. I lost my baby. It was my lifelong dream. Uh, so it was terrible, trauma and painful. But, that whole thing changed the direction of my life and said, that's why I went back to study psychology to understand myself, to understand was this spiritual awakening real or delusional? So something that looked terrible ended up being one of the greatest blessings and gifts of my life that put my life on a much more rewarding, meaningful path. So just a personal example of this thing of how something that looks bad, terrible, whatever word you want to use, that ends up being a hidden blessing. And that's part of this thing about we talked earlier about trust. If we have this basic trust in life, when we look back and we see, oh, all these bad things that quote unquote happened, the good things came out of it. Then when the next quote unquote bad thing or difficulty or challenge arises, we say, okay, I'm going to survive this like I have done everything else. And, this is not to be a Pollyannish or to minimize or do what's called spiritual bypassing. No, the difficulty is difficult. I'm not trying to say take it away. But when we have the faith or the trust that things will work out, that gives us the resilience to work through it. And then when we have the resilience to work through it, that increases the chances that we'll emerge okay from it, and that further reinforces our trust in ourselves and in life. So it's a positive feedback system. If I have that trust, I have that faith, it gives me the resilience and the willingness to go through the difficulty, which increases the chances I'll come through it, which increases my trust and confidence in myself and in life and in the universe, which then reinforces and deepens my resilience.
And it also gives you a level of empathy, compassion, and understanding for someone who is where you already have been so that you
It's
can
going
help.
through the difficulty. Uh-huh.
Right, which is fantastic. Do you feel like the principles in your book, because it is written for spiritual leadership, but reading through it, it feels like it's as applicable to an individual as it is to someone that's in a leadership role? Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking that. I made a mental note to say that earlier, but I forgot. So you're bringing it up. So first of all, I want to say that we're all leaders. What is leaders? Leaders is someone who influences people in a group setting. So, we're leaders in our family, we're leaders in our community, we're leaders in our neighborhood. So that's first point. But secondly, yeah, I've had a lot of people I've had some people like 18, 20-year-old that are just interested in spiritual growth, and they found it helpful because, yeah, the case studies that I bring with each quality in each chapter come from people that are facing leadership dilemmas or situations, and they're primarily my clients or CEOs. But the issues are universal, and the tools and the exercises. So developing spiritual intelligence, like we're saying, is not like you read this book and like, oh, okay, I got it. Um, it's like building new muscles, new neural pathways in the brain. And, however many years we've lived on this planet, 20, 30, 50, 60, reprogramming that is ongoing. So it's building new habits. But each chapter in the book has exercises that's related to that quality. And those exercises are not just for people in formal leadership positions, but anybody can benefit from it. So yeah, I mean, um,
I also really like your AIM method, allow and include more. Can you talk about that?
yeah, well, so this is like uh this is how it actually relates a little bit to trust, which is, I may have a situation, I'm scared or I'm angry or I'm sad, so-called negative emotions. And most of us are, oh, this is negative. I want to turn away from it because it doesn't feel good, or, I'm afraid that if I feel my sadness, I'm going to go into a black hole of depression and I'll never come out. Or if I feel my anger, I will, act out in a violent way and then I'm going to regret it. Or if I feel my fear, I'm going to shrink and freeze or whatever. So then we have this dichotomy. Either I go into it and I get swallowed by it and it overtakes me, or I try and ignore it and repress it. And that's kind of the dichotomy that most people think about. So what the AIM method is it's the allow and then include more. So the point is we don't deny our anger or our sadness or our fear. We feel it in the body. And then we include. One thing I always like to include is the earth, Mother Earth, because Mother Earth is always supporting us on the one hand from below, like the pressure, like we could feel it right now through our feet, through the floor, through the building, the house we're in. And on the other hand, it's pulling us in a loving embrace through the force of gravity. So you could think about it like a mother. What does the mother do when a baby is upset? She hugs them into her chest, and so pulling in. But also there's a pressure of chest to chest, heart to heart, skin to skin. So there's this dual thing of like the pulling in, but the support, and the earth is always doing that for us when you think about it. But so if I'm angry, I feel my anger. My blood pressure is high, and there's pressure in my head, and my muscles are tensing up. Okay, I just notice it. And I feel my feet on the ground and the connection to Mother Earth, both the pressure on the feet as well as the weight of my body, the force of gravity. So I let the earth support me in feeling my anger. And the best mothers, what they do is when a child is angry, or sad, they just hug them and hold them and let them feel it. And then the child learns to self-regulate. So the earth is supporting us to feel what we are, as we are, where we are. So that's the first part of include, and then you can include more and more, and then you're like, what else am I experiencing? Well, there's sounds, there's temperature sensations of the wind, and then when you put it all in context, it's not. I didn't focus just on the anger or the fear or the sadness. There's a lot more happening, and so without denying it, that opens up our awareness, the aperture, and the more we open, at some point we include everything, and then that's kind of like a state of oneness, really. I mean, it takes you to a spiritual state. of oneness.
No, I love that. And I love the sense of community that comes from doing that and focusing on Mother Earth and then, building it out through there. Can you talk about some of your community resources on your website?
Yeah, well, we run these free community events once a month. We take one of these qualities of spiritual intelligence and we gather and we do either a little talk, a guided meditation, and exercises in small groups. So the last one was last Friday was Valentine's Day. We did it on devotional love. I think the one before that we did on openness. It was the beginning of the year, but the one before that we did on gratitude. So, there are these qualities, and each month there's an event, and it's free, and people come and connect and
It's a
cultivate.
great it's a great resource and they're all linked up there. So if anyone's listening and they want to check it out, they're all there. It's not like, oh, well, you missed it on Valentine's Day. They're all there, which I love that you do that.
Yeah, so you can listen to the replay, and there's a YouTube channel, Awakening Spiritual Intelligence. And we provide the exercises so that if you weren't in the event, you could do it on your own with a friend or a partner or with your journal or your tape recorder or whatever, voice memo. Tape recorders are outdated.
They're still lurking around, though. People still have them.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
so I say this a lot, but I really, really believe it in my heart to be true that we're all being called up to come together in unity as human beings. And part of that is taking care of each other and taking care of the earth. And I truly believe that in my soul. We signed up, we said, okay, we'll come and help. This seems like the epitome of your work, that you're really um, allowing people to show up as they are to realize they can all take part in this. So thank you. It's really, really important work and very, very appreciated.
Yeah, no, it's great. So just and going back to the theme we talked about earlier about the self and the other and the greater whole. I mean, the analogy I think about is like cells in the human body. So some spiritual teachings say we're all one, and I think that's true at some level, but it's a little simplistic. We're also individuals. I mean, in physics, there's the particle wave duality. But anyway, I won't go there necessarily. But when you think about in our human body, there are cells, right? And each cell has a cell membrane, and it has to keep integrity on its own function. There's an immunity and all this thing that the cell has to take care of itself. But each cell is also embedded in an organ, and the organ is embedded in a bigger organism, and so the cell has to take care of itself, otherwise it withers and dies and can't. But it has a unique function and role to play, and it has to. If the organ gets sick or the organism gets toxic, then the cell eventually is going to wither away and die. So it's a paradox, or not so much a paradox. It's just you have to do both. You have to do the self-care as an individual cell, and you have to understand that you're embedded in this organism. And unless the organism does well, then ultimately all the cells are not going to do so well. And when there is environmental destruction, wars, political polarization, all the stuff, I mean, I can make all the money I want, whatever, but I'm going to feel the effect on that, and my children are going to suffer the consequences of that. So yeah, and what's interesting though, just with the body analogy, is all these cells that are differentiated. One cell becomes a liver cell, another one is a thyroid, another one is a kidney or whatever it is, but they all come from the same DNA and the same stem cell, but somehow they all specialize. So, in spiritual language, we might say, well, we're all made in the image and likeness of the divine, of God, if you use the Judeo-Christian tradition. So we're all, in essence, the same, but we are different.
Right.
Well, I mean, we're all the same and we're all differentiated, like in the human body. It's all the same DNA, the same stem cells, but we all have different roles. And
It's the thumbprint theory that we all have that unique little tiny spark that makes us different than the other 8 billion plus on the planet. So we're together in humanity as a species. We are a species, but
Uh-huh.
we each have that little tweak that just makes us that our own specific connection to divine in
Yeah,
however it works for us. And I
exactly.
think that I love the body analogy. That's great. That's a great way to visualize it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that too. Well, tell people how they can find out more about you and connect with you and let us know what you're working on next.
They can find out about me. I have a website. It's yosiamram.net. It's just my name. There's also a website called awakeningspiritualintelligence.org. This is nonprofit, or awakeningsi.org. Just the spiritual intelligence shortened to SI. There's a YouTube channel with that long name, at Awakening Spiritual Intelligence, is one word. But if they go to my website or this awakeningsi.org, there's also links to, a free assessment that people can get, a profile of your strengths. And this isn't to get the ego engaged in terms of how you compare whether my spiritual intelligence is higher than others, but more to see for each person. You talked about a thumbprint. We have a profile. For some people, gratitude is really well developed, and other people, mindfulness. Other people, they have a great sense of purpose, but they lack in not so much joy or beauty or whatever. So it's good to see what are my strengths, and then where are my opportunities to grow, and which of these qualities do I want to work on. And then there are tips for working with each of those qualities. So anyway, I'm just throwing out a bunch of resources.
That's fantastic. Are you working on a new book or a new project?
Boy. I'm just starting to, it's like I did this research with leadership. I'm starting a research with couples and seeing how spiritual intelligence plays into committed relationships, and how it relates to attachment theory and emotional intelligence, and explaining relational satisfaction. I think that's the other domain that most people, you know, care about a lot, and challenges us and triggers us, and so on. So someday, hopefully, I'll have a book called Spiritually Intelligent Relationship, and it will parallel spiritually intelligent leadership.
Oh, that'll be fascinating. You'll have to come back on when that comes out.
Okay, we're probably looking a number of years out, but it's a big project. But
Well, come on before then and talk to us again because this has been great and very, very inspiring. Thank you so much, Yosi. We will put all of your links into the show notes. And we hope everyone listening has enjoyed this and felt inspired to remember the own spiritual intelligent leadership that's existed within you. Please remember, as always, to show up, do great work, and share your light.
Take care.